Come on.
The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we dive into a topic that resonates deeply with all of us, and it's been a question pondered over the ages: the difference between happiness and fulfillment. Our guest is no stranger to these concepts, or no stranger to us. Mike, introduce our guest today.
Our special guest, absolutely. So today with us, we have Tullio Siragusa, who many of you know. He is a seasoned business strategist, author, and speaker, renowned for integrating disruptive technologies with emotional intelligence, or EQ, to drive transformative growth through the combination of those two things. With over 35 years of experience, he's empowered leaders and organizations to achieve sustainable, purpose-driven success. And so for our listeners today, they're really going to have some key takeaways from those components. As the founder of Inventrica Advisory, Tullio provides strategic guidance, serving as a fractional chief operating officer and leadership development coach. His leadership philosophy centers on fostering fulfillment through service, purpose, and empathetic connection, a philosophy he brings to life as the producer and host of our show, the Bliss Business Podcast. Tullio is deeply committed to promoting a human-centric approach to innovation, exemplified through significant roles such as being on the advisory board at the University of California, Riverside, Design Thinking Executive Program, and as the co-founder of RadicalPurpose.org. Through his multifaceted endeavors, Tullio has helped organizations achieve billions in revenue, create purpose-driven cultures, and pioneer new standards for leadership and innovation, which we're going to key in on today. When he's not coaching or building high-performing teams, Tullio shares his insights through various platforms, including in his writings, writing the challenges of conventional thinking and inspired change. Tullio, I am not only pleased to have you as a colleague and member of our team at Zero Company, but I'm thrilled to have you back on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I like having the questions turned around on us here as kind of an annual act of empathy with our guests. So this is Tullio's turn here. Tullio,
I'm in the hot seat today, huh?
Tullio, great to have you on, of course. So let's start with your personal journey. So your blog paints kind of a vivid picture of fulfillment being rooted in purpose and service. Can you share how this philosophy has shaped your life and career? Was there a defining moment that shifted your focus from that happiness to fulfillment?
Yes, very much so. Thanks for that. I'm excited to be the guest this time. There were a few things that definitely shaped me in this direction. Maybe I need to go back a little bit before this was my thinking. And perhaps a good way to describe it was my life when I was living in New York and in London. I split my life between living in New York City and in London. I had a flat in London. I had a flat in New York City. And I had a Black American Express card and a lot of the checklist items that many of us perhaps subscribe to as the vehicle towards happiness. And I really bought into that. If you have all these things and you accomplish all these things, you'll be happy. And I chased that and succeeded at chasing that. But found myself empty. I wasn't fulfilled in just making myself happy, striving for things to be happy. And I think probably the best thing that ever happened to me was losing everything. I had started a company out of the UK, invested a lot of my money into it. Just a lot of fun. And the markets collapsed. This was around 2017, 2018, and couldn't raise money for the company. So moved the headquarters to New York. And then the markets collapsed there too, and found myself having to start over and going through bankruptcy, and essentially realizing, okay, I don't have all the stuff that I used to check off that made me happy, or at least gave me the impression or the illusion that I was happy. What's my source of happiness now? And it was very dark time. And I was fortunate to have some amazing mentors and coaches that really helped me out of that time. And I'll never forget, there was one in particular who inspired me to go volunteer my time, which is something I have adopted too in my coaching practice too, when people have a difficulty being empathetic. And I was like, what is that going to do? And I'll never forget, he volunteered me to go organize a storage facility at something, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a storage facility that needed to be organized. And I happened to have a skill in being able to see a mess like a puzzle with all the pieces fragmented and then put it together and organize things. It's like a little gift, right? So I went through this, and day in and day out, I'm over here organizing this warehouse and labeling things and creating a spreadsheet where everything was. And I'm like, how did I go from being at the top clubs in London, building a company, flying from London to Paris on a private helicopter with my quote unquote Victoria's Secret girlfriend, to organizing a dusty old warehouse? Where have I gone wrong? So, but it was such a humbling experience that I did this for about a month, that it changed me. It made me realize for the first time, probably in my adult life, what it was like to do something that had nothing to do with me, where I was offering a service that I was capable of for the benefit of someone else, for an entire organization. And it really opened my eyes to the fulfillment that I received in being purposeful and being of service, even as a volunteer. I had experienced joy I had never experienced before in that month, doing something that would have otherwise been against my ego. So that was the defining moment for me to realize the difference between chasing happiness, which can be fleeting, and being purposeful in being of service and activating fulfillment. And what followed from there, this is about 15 years ago, was a commitment to not only learning more about that, but to helping others. So I've made this my life mission, to help people step into empathy, to step into service, to step into purpose, as a way to feel truly empowered and experience lasting fulfillment in their lives.
Mm.
You know, it's interesting. I think Martha on our staff kind of has the same sort of story with when her father died. Someone told her, just go volunteer. And I think that helped her get her out of, that tragedy. And it's an interesting thing when you switch to this service mode, right? You went to this humility and service mode, and that'll teach you a lot of lessons of, what's really important to you, right? Is that kind of, over that month-long time in that storage unit organizing things, is that where you're contemplating? What's going through your mind then?
Well, it was, you're alone doing this, right? So there was a lot of introspection, and there was definitely a lot of humility being activated in this. But what it made me realize is that you can still be purposeful and accomplish something that maybe no one's going to give you credit for. It's because it was in a warehouse, so it's not public. I just came from being in a very public kind of a role with this platform that we had created, where promoters use it, and club goers and concert goers. So it went from like this around celebrities kind of mode to in a warehouse alone, right? No one's going to see what I'm doing here. But over time, and also through some coaching, I began to realize that fulfillment is something really internal. It's not something you can check a list off and feel fulfilled. And also begin to realize that most of us base our own self-worth on those things that we can achieve and grab onto that are external of ourselves. And it's come full circle for me. I've actually studied over 1,400 people in preparation of what was going to be a TEDx talk. Hopefully someday I'll get to give it. But the point is that what I discovered through this was that most of us judge our self-worth based on these external factors. If I'm in a good relationship, well, then I'm happy. If I'm in a great job, then I'm fulfilled. If I have money, then I'm happy. If I'm healthy, then I'm happy. All these external factors that we give weight to as a way to determine our worth, versus realizing that it's all internal. I have the ability to always be a 10 out of 10 in potential. Whether I succeed at something every time or not, it doesn't matter. It's the journey, the process. And people always talk about, love the journey. It's not even about the journey. It's the lessons and the growth you experience in that journey. That's where the true fulfillment happens. It's not the journey itself. And so that one experience was a turning point because, again, it was completely not about me. I wasn't going to get any credit for this. It wasn't public. So it was like almost like the secret, quiet self activating, doing something. When I saw the place being organized, it felt good. I'm like, wow, this place looks good. And I've organized it into a spreadsheet. I'm like, I'm making an impact here. I don't care who can see it or who can't see it. I see it. I feel good about it. I'm doing the right thing here. And that's the shift from realizing that you can do the right thing, even if it doesn't necessarily turn out to be great, versus being externally driven. Let me do the great thing to see if other people respond to it. Do people like what I'm doing? So there's this people-pleasing piece of it too, that's part of low self-worth. So many different lessons. I felt like I went into this vacuum of like growth. And it was a 10-year journey. It wasn't an overnight thing. But what I learned from that is the importance of making sure we're focusing on the right things. And chasing happiness is a sure way to fail at actually feeling fulfilled in your life. It's not possible. How many things can you buy? How many parties can you go to? How many relationships can you have? All these things that you check off. I have more stuff, I'm happy. Yeah, it makes you happy. Money does buy happiness. It can do it, but you have to keep doing it over and over and over, right? Whereas if you do something that's about feeding your internal sense of self-worth based on your values, who you are, and learning that, and then realizing that no matter what the outcomes are, the fact that you're in motion towards being of service to others, that in itself activates that fulfillment. It's the act of serving others, the act of making other people happy that generates your happiness. That's a key thing I've learned. And it wasn't just me who's learned that. I've spoken to many people, successful entrepreneurs that went through a similar journey. One of my mentors went through a similar journey, multimillionaire, lost everything, went bankrupt, went through a similar journey. Anyone I've ever spoken to that's been highly successful, that's leading a fulfilled life, has gone through a similar journey. Some of us have had to get corrected with a 2x4, the figurative 2x4. And some people just naturally are that way. Most of us who struggle with that have to learn somehow through some difficult changes.
I like the metaphor of the storage unit in a way, and putting things in their proper place for you while you're kind of alone. There's something poetic there about that. Do you think society, especially in kind of today's digital age, it's conditioned to prioritize happiness over fulfillment? I mean, what role does this play in people feeling empty despite achieving whatever they've felt like was important to them?
Absolutely. I think that whether it is intentional to drive more consumerism, or whether it is subconscious with this idea of even the hustle culture, there is a constant bombardment that in order to be happy, you have to have more. And so there's a constant push towards, I need to have the nicer car, the nice house, the nice this, the nice that, the nice clothes, the name brand clothes. There is a constant push for this. Now, whether it's being strategically designed to push more consumerism, might be, right? Or it's just how people can relate to this idea of desperately wanting to be happy and giving them a concrete way to do it. Because you can buy stuff and feel good and get stuff and accomplish things and feel good, but it doesn't last. Most people feel like that was good for the moment, and now I'm back to feeling empty. So there is definitely a societal aspect of encouraging chasing happiness at all costs. And even so today, there's a lot more talk about me. Just take care of you. Number one, make yourself happy. Make yourself happy, right? And it's even impacted relationships. People give up on relationship very easily and with the excuse of, I need to make myself happy. Because working towards having a good relationship, being more purposeful in a relationship, that does take work. It takes intentionality, and it does take transformation and change and growth. And what comes out of it on the other side is fulfillment. Most people want the shortcut, and it's not their fault. It's being pushed in every angle to take shortcuts. But it doesn't work. It doesn't last. It's the same problem with drugs, alcohol, or addictions. They work temporarily, but they don't sustain you long term. So in that essence, they don't work.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, and I love the thought, too, there about thinking of others, Tullio. So maybe we can transition a little bit into talking about some of the folks that you've helped, through your work. So you've worked with a number of leaders across different industries, coached them, to embrace, lives that are centered around purpose driven. So maybe share with us an example or two of someone who, you saw made the shift from chasing just that short temporary happiness to really living a life of purpose. What changes did they experience?
Yeah, thanks. I've been very fortunate to have been blessed to have influenced a few folks in this direction. So I consider myself blessed because coming from that space and making an effort to try to share how to make that shift is the greatest gift I could personally receive. So that's something that's very valuable to me personally, to be able to make that influence. And there's one in particular I actually remember. And this was a live coaching session that people can find on my Rant and Grow podcast that I was doing a few years back. And we were digging into this entrepreneur who had the habit of starting a business, but for some reason not seeing it through. And he had this mindset that he was supposed to accomplish success quickly, because there's a lot of that's sold to you, like, hey, you can do this overnight, be rich in 3 months. So he had this mindset. So whenever it got a little hard or it wasn't getting what he wanted, he would give up. That was one element of it. So that was influenced from the outside. The other part of it was something that happened to him when he was 7 years old. And you see, he loved art, but he wasn't a very good artist. So when he tried to make art, one of his teachers said, you're not good at this, right? So it was very detrimental to him, traumatic to him, to hear he wasn't good at it, even though he realized he wasn't good at it. But in that moment, he planted the seed that even if you love something, if it doesn't turn out well, people are going to judge you for it. So don't even try. And it was a subconscious seed that was planted with him. So this carried into his adult life. So here he is, he's being sold this idea of immediate success, right? And then he's got this belief that if I don't see results and people are not responding positively to what I'm doing, then I shouldn't do it, because it brought him back into that traumatic moment, right? That's a wound that needs to be healed. So I'm not a therapist, but we use some neuroscience techniques to practice some mantras over a period of 3 months to get him out of that mindset. And then I had him again as a guest and got him out of that mindset. Now the other challenge was actually following through on the commitment, right? So he was sticking with it, but he was finding himself just not being able to follow through sometimes, or procrastinating. And then we dug into what was the cause of that, right? And each layer by layer begin to see this transformation. The key component was learning that as long as he was in service towards his goal, he could continue to grow. And so we shifted this mindset from succeeding with outcome, or having a preconditioned judgment about what the outcome should be, and change the mindset that you succeed by growing. Everything is an opportunity for growth. Whether you succeed or fail, there's a growth opportunity in that. You're going to be better than you were a few months ago, even through failure, because you can grow from that. If you have the mindset that this is a growth and learning opportunity, not a failure, quote unquote. Right. Failure. So it was shifting a mindset towards learning to embrace difficulties and even failures as learning opportunities and growth opportunities, where you do enough of them, you eventually come out on the other side stronger. I mean, look at Disney. He tried 7 times, failed, bankrupt 7 times. Did he give up? No, he kept going. And millions of people go to this happy place. And he made that possible by not giving up. So it's a mindset. And in that process, I'm sure he learned a lot about himself and what didn't work and what could work, and reapplied it. Most people would just give up after 1 or 2 tries, but he didn't. So this was the mindset that I wanted to instill in him, that as long as you are in service, you're focused on your purpose, why you're doing this, does this benefit others? If that becomes your guiding star, then that is worth everything. If you learn along the way through failure, that's part of the process of growing. And here's the thing I've always thought about and adopted. In science, every discovery is made through the process of multiple failures. If we were not willing to go through failure, we would never discover anything in science or in medicine. So it's built into the success equation. Failure is built into the success equation of discoveries, of science, of medicine. Why should we act any differently towards any goals that we have or anything that we're trying to accomplish? Failure is built into the success equation to getting to your ultimate goal. But you have to change your mindset and your thinking from being, the lever that needs to be pulled to you're in this journey of growth, and the fulfillment comes from continuously growing and recognizing that you just became better than you were the day before.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's well said. From the business world, even to the athletic world, right? We have so many examples of athletes that failed. I think of Michael Jordan, right? Not making his basketball team when he, first was in high school. And had he not continued down that path, what we would have missed, right, as far as the world goes. And I love, the Nike commercial that talks about all of his failures and shots he missed and games he lost, championships he lost, but he kept at it, right? And so I think that's a very good point. So curious too, Tullio, like what further advice would you give somebody who feels like they're unfulfilled right now, and doesn't really know how to find their purpose, right? Like how can they go about that?
Well, there are 2 things. I'm always about getting to action, right? So the first thing is go find something to volunteer your time, not give money. It's easy to give money. Go volunteer your time. Go find something you can give of yourself to, so you can step out of the feeling sorry for yourself or being completely focused on yourself. Get into service for others. And the other thing is create sticky notes and put them all over where you can see them, in your car, in front of your computer. And it says, I've always wanted to. Just make that statement in front of you. I've always wanted to. And in a matter of no time, it will emerge what it is that you want to do as your purpose. I've always wanted to. What is that? And some people, like, it happens in an hour, and some people it takes a month, where they're just constantly asking this question. I've always wanted to. I don't know what I've always wanted to. Whatever. Eventually, it will come up. It works every time. And in that moment, when you say, I've always wanted to, that's your truth. That's the thing you want to be of service around. Okay. So, and you got to decipher whether it's like something that's healthy or not. It can't be like, I've always wanted to jump off of a building, nothing like that, or, a parachute. That might be a temporary thing. It's more like, I've always wanted to, it's be related to something you want to create a value for others. That's the key thing. It has to connect to values for others. When you can connect to that, then you have your guiding, purposeful way of being.
Yeah.
So first, practice volunteering so you can step out of your own self. You can learn more empathy, learn to be of service to others, and then ask yourself, I've always wanted to get to that answer of what you want to do. Because you've got to be practicing being of service in order for you to fulfill being of service. They have to go hand in hand. You can't just cerebrally think about this, and it doesn't work that way. I always recommend do both. Be in action and be in consciousness thought. I've always wanted to. When it comes up, then work towards it. And once you have it, then write it down. Write down a plan. All the skills you have to fulfill that purpose and all the gaps. And then work with mentors, work with coaches. Ask a trusted friend that you respect. Hey, these are all the things I think I need to work on. What do you think? That's something worth getting an opinion on. What do you think I need to work on? This is my goal. This is what I want to fulfill. What do you think I need to work on? And if they don't agree with you, then find someone else. If you don't want to get their opinion on your goal, then just simply ask, hey, I'm trying to develop these skills because you went through an analysis. What do you think I need to do to develop this skill? People will always give you insights and offer their help if you're very specific. But you have to treat yourself like you're building a business. You got to have a plan. You got to write things down. You've got to have an action plan. You've got to have goals you're working towards. It doesn't just happen through osmosis, but it's not complicated. But the very first thing is go be of service. Volunteer your time, be of service. That's going to put you in a mindset to activate being of service, to be purposeful, and then figure out, I've always wanted to, what that is. And that's going to give you an eye-opening way to see what you want to do in the world.
Right. And would you say, I guess it'd have to go in conjunction with not a selfish motive, right? Like, I've always wanted to be, radio music star, right? For the purposes of the fame, right? Would you agree with that?
This is the key thing. So, and this is why it's important too, because selfishness in itself isn't necessarily bad if it's in the right context, right? So before all this happened, I was selfish in the sense all I wanted to do is just worry about what I could get out of life, right? Now, my selfishness is more tied to where do I spend my energy and who do I surround myself with that supports my fulfilling my purpose. And my purpose is tied to being of service to others. So it's being selfish about safeguarding your energy towards the thing that's going to serve others. So there's a shift that needs to happen. So I've always wanted to be a rock star. Well, that could be selfish from your own point of view. Or I've always wanted to make people smile through entertainment. Then the purpose gets elevated to maybe you have a talent, maybe you're a great singer. So pursuing that as a way to entertain and make people smile and be happy, it elevates that to a purposeful activity, not just something about feeding your ego. So you could pursue the same thing, but your context shift makes a huge difference on whether you succeed at it or not. Because then what happens, even if you don't become a superstar, but you are living in your purpose to want to be entertaining, you're growing, you're learning, you're doing what you love, and that's gratifying and fulfilling. And maybe at some point that opens up the door to be of value to a lot more people. But even if you only touch one person in your life, you can still have accomplished great purpose by touching one person. And that's the other thing too. like, I want to impact 1 million people. That's awesome. But just maybe first try to impact one person or two people, maybe the people close to you. Maybe do something that's not about you for them. And that takes practice and a change in mindset. Helping to do that is get coaches, mentors, people who you trust, those who've overcome things. Those are great people you can humbly ask questions and be vulnerable with them and trust them to help you, because it's not something you can do alone. It takes a team effort to make that kind of transformation.
So Tullio, your leadership philosophy kind of incorporates that empathy and service. How do you see this playing out in businesses today, and why is that critical for leaders to embrace this approach?
Well, here's the great thing about adopting empathy in business. Talking about this 10, 15 years ago, people would be just like, oh, that's cool. It's like fluff stuff, right? But now we actually have data that supports the idea this is really great business strategy.
Pages of data. I've got
pages of data.
Study after study after study. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there is data now that is available that suggests that those who practice empathy in the workplace have higher profitability, higher engagement internally, greater retention rate, and revenue and profitability. If that's all an organization cares about, that in itself is significant enough where they should be paying attention to it. In fact, those organizations that operate this way outperform any organization that doesn't. There was a study done across a number of companies in the S&P 500 that companies that operated with more freedom at work, self-managed organization, more empathetic organization were like 7x more profitable and grew 10x faster. So many companies that think it's just foofy fluff stuff, they're actually uninformed, with all due respect to them, about a strategic business model that is the most effective model that has ever existed. And by not adopting it, they're actually doing a disservice to themselves, their shareholders, and their employees. So it's no longer a nice thing to have. It's good for people, but it's good for the bottom line too. And so it'd be important for people to dig into that, learn more about that, because that's the direction it's going. And even the McKinseys of the world are putting content out there and data out there. The Deloittes, the EYs of the world, putting data out there around this, because the data is irrefutable and it's powerful. And it's going to possibly over time even change the way people get educated in their master's degree, right? Maybe part of the class should be learning empathy or some design thinking principles, which is rooted on empathy. All these things are beginning to bubble up. It's not just the crazies who were doing this 10, 15 years ago, but actually the really smart, business savvy people that figured out that serving the needs of others also serves the needs of the bottom line.
Yeah, we're a little slow on the uptake sometimes, I think, as people. Like Aristotle literally is talking about the difference between what he called eudaimonic and hedonic. One is eudaimonic is more of this finding your happiness in that purpose, right? That's the true fulfillment. And then the hedonic is that temporary pleasure-based, whatever you're trying to make yourself happy for, that's just brief and not lasting. And, these were topics talked about, thousands of years ago. And, and business has just been like, okay, whatever. But now we're starting to see this really finally starting to see it really kick in at a stage where it's got maybe a little bit of momentum now.
I mean, some of these people were put to death for having these conversations back then. So the fact that it's becoming mainstream now, thousands of years later, is astonishing, and it's time.
Yeah, for sure. So, how can organizations kind of foster this culture of fulfillment for their teams? Is it even possible today? This is a softball question, Tullio.
Yeah.
We know it's possible, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. So first and foremost is working with the leadership team to identify the mindset. Many of us older generation were sold on this idea of achieving the C-suite, and it was a carrot for the desire for profit, pleasure, prestige, power. If you're in the top seat, you've arrived, you've climbed the ladder. And so there's a lot of mindset around that. And most people who get to that place realize, really, this is it. I have no life anymore. I don't do anything I enjoy. I'm having to do all the stuff I don't want to do. Most get to that place and realize what was I sold here? So it's exhausting. And a lot of these executives often find themselves being duplicitous. They're sweet and kind and nice at home, and then come to the office and put on a mask about being this corporate person. It's exhausting to be that way. So working with the leadership to identify the value of just being human and themselves and giving themselves permission to do that and creating a safe space to do that is the first step. And this is usually led by a CEO who's reached a certain level of consciousness where they feel this is the time. They don't feel threatened by losing, quote unquote, losing control or essentially relinquishing or sharing authority. So there's a certain level of consciousness someone has to achieve to make that happen. And then helping the leadership team step into that freedom, seeing that there's tremendous freedom in getting into a place where you are activating empathy in the workplace, because part of activating empathy is also treating people with dignity and treating them as adults. There's too much codependency in most businesses where the employees are the children and the executives are the parents. That is not healthy. We're all adults. The employees make difficult decisions in their lives every day, whether to have kids, whether to buy a house, where to live, make healthcare choices, very difficult decisions every day. They're perfectly capable of making difficult decisions. So they need to be treated with respect. So it's shifting a mindset to being the go-to, quote unquote, boss to being an enabler and facilitator. How can I help people step into leadership so that they co-own what we're doing, so that we create a model of collaboration? And through that, you begin to shift away from this codependent model. Now, there's some things you need to do to make that happen. There's some coaching that needs to happen, but there's also ways you can adapt the way you approach goals. I happen to like OKRs, but it could be any other system, as long as it's one where instead of owners, there are champions. So you create a model for collaboration where teams collaborate towards similar goals and work together. So you can go into action to shift the organization into this model, which has tremendous visibility by doing weekly stand-ups. There's ways to get to a place where the fear of losing control isn't all there because there's tremendous visibility and transparency. And over a few quarters, there's a shift that begins to happen. People begin to say, this is not a trick. They actually value what I have to say, because quite a few times when a company's going through this transformation, employees are like, is this a trick? So they begin to say, this is not a trick. They actually value what I have to contribute. So people voluntarily begin to participate more. And create a model where people can fail and still be safe. And as leaders, be the first one to say, I messed up. Can I get your help? Create a psychological safety of openness and intimacy. And I always say, don't think as your business as a family. That's the biggest mistake companies say. We're a family. Some families are really dysfunctional. You don't get to choose your family. But your friends, you get to choose your friends. Your friends are people you want to spend time with. So create a model where it's a friendship. And what do friends do? They support each other when things are difficult. They celebrate each other. And they call each other out when things are going off track. So that's the ultimate goal, is create a model of friendship. And some people be like, nah, I don't want to call my friendship, because if I have to do cuts, then I have to cut my friends off. Well, if you operate this way, you won't have to do cuts because it's a collaborative conversation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of misunderstandings on how this works because people have not tried it. But as they begin to transform in this direction step by step, it can take a full year to make that transformation. Then they begin to see the benefit of it. And the CEO gets their lives back. They get to focus on things they love doing instead of things they have to do. So that's the carrot, right? Why should we do this? Because you get to do more what you love to do, and so does everybody else. And you still can run a business successfully and more profitable because you don't need all these middle management layers to be effective.
So Tullio, we've got an audience question. I think that ties right in here. This one, we've got a couple. This one I want to ask first. So how can individuals who may not be in a C-suite leadership position in their organization impact change and encourage their team towards empathy-first business models? I think that ties into what you're talking about right here, but from the non-leadership side.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, Anthony. Because the mindset is often, I'm not empowered, I'm not a leader, so how can I influence? And that's a mind shift that needs to be made to think you are a leader, you do have agency, and what you do does influence the organization. You just have to have the courage, because if you're always doing it from a place of being of service to the organization, no one will ever argue with you about something that's valuable with the organization. What happens most of the time is you got a lot of employees that will complain about something and offer no solution. That doesn't work, right? Or will complain and offer a solution that doesn't necessarily portray how it benefits the entire organization. So being a leader is being of service to others, stepping outside yourself and finding how a solution can benefit the entire organization. And in some cases, if you're not a leader, you might have to provide that input to your leader to empower them to make that impact and be able to work through those channels. Unfortunately, when you have hierarchy, you have to work through those channels, but you still can make contribution. You still can influence change if it's coming from a place of service. And those who do that eventually get picked to be the next leaders. And that's actually the secret on how to grow in an organization, especially in traditional hierarchical organization. Those who are willing to be of service to others always get cherry picked for the next big jobs, because leaders are looking for people who are going to step up to be a leader. So be the leader. Don't ask permission to be the leader. You don't have to wait for someone to give you the title to be the leader, but just look for ways you can contribute to the greater well-being. That's not about you. That's the secret.
All right, we got another quick question. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs to develop empathy as a core skill in their journey?
It goes back to the first thing is go volunteer your time. Find a cause you want to volunteer your time to. That's going to put you in action towards being of service to others, doing something that doesn't benefit you in any way, benefits others. That's the being in action. And the other one is read. There's tons of content out there about developing empathy. What does it look like? How to apply it in a very pragmatic way. One of the greatest thing that you can do as a leader is take on a course on design thinking. That will open you up to empathy being at the root of business models and how you think about others and how you shape both your products, your services, your organization, your thinking, because it teaches you to be curious. And so that's a way to actually really enhance your empathy. I significantly were able to enhance my ability to practice empathy by taking on design thinking and not only becoming a practitioner, but then an advisor to helping others do the same. So be in action as a volunteer so you can actually experience being of service to others. Read, take a course on design thinking, find some coaches who are specialized in empathetic coaching, and build that muscle over time.
Awesome, Tullio. So before we wrap up here, just to maybe summarize some of the key points that you've shared with our audience today. So for the listeners, can you just summarize the practical steps that they can take to transition from chasing that happiness to really building a life, of fulfillment, centered around purpose and service? Like, what is it that they can go and do?
So first thing, you have to accept that chasing happiness is a hoax. So that might come as a shock, but it is. So let go of this idea that you can chase and find happiness in things. It's not possible. You can temporarily, but not sustainably long-term. Second, go and give of yourself. Volunteer your time. Not just give money, volunteer your time. Find something on a weekly basis that you can give to that gets you stepping outside of yourself to be of service to others. That's going to help you develop the being of service muscle. Third, always ask this, do this self-reflection about I've always wanted to, and give yourself as long as it takes to get to the answer. I've always wanted to. And the caveat is I've always wanted to, and it's going to be something of service to others that benefits humanity, right? Probably the best example I could give, the person who invented the chair. The chair is something that answers the question, could I use a chair? Yes, I would use a chair. Would everybody else use a chair? Yes, everyone else would use a chair. Is it something that can be sustained through natural resources? Absolutely. It can be made out of wood, it can be made out of steel. So it has universal impact. When it has these four vertices coming together, that's something that is worthy of developing. So when you think about I've always wanted to, think, does it benefit me? Does it benefit the world? Is it something sustainable? Is it universally of value? Okay. And then finally, get a coach to help you develop those skills. Take courses. Design thinking is probably one of the best courses to help you understand how empathy and action comes into play, and gives you the tools on how to actually apply it and the methodology on how to be empathetic towards all that you do. So that's going to give you a systematic educational way to activate that. But with just the course, without developing the muscle, the volunteering, it's not as effective. You'll learn theories that make sense, but developing that muscle requires being in action, which is why I always encourage volunteer time. Go do something that puts you in that practice.
That's really good steps, Tullio. Thank you for highlighting those for us.
Tullio, got a question for you. What would you say to those who say love doesn't belong in business?
Well, life is love, and business is an expression of that love. Why do people get into business? They want to create some value. They want to change the world in some cases. They want to benefit others. Why are you in healthcare? Because you want to take care of people. Why are you in the hospitality business? Because you want to create a great environment for people to go to when they're on vacation. If we go back to the question of why we started the business to begin with, there was a love affair with something that pushed us to get into that business. So the idea of that love doesn't belong in business makes no sense, because business is an expression of love. Where it doesn't make sense is when you lose track of that and you just become very shareholder focused, revenue focused. Then it's sort of like, what's the point? Go back to the question why you started that company to begin with. And you'll always go back to finding a love towards something you're trying to change. So love is not only part of business, business is love.
Excellent, Tullio. As always, thank you today for all your insights on everything. If you want to find out more about Tullio, go to tulliosiragusa.com, where he dives deeper into fulfillment, empathy-driven leadership, and purpose-driven success. And as always, thank you to our listeners today for tuning in to the Bliss Business Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who could benefit from Tullio's insights. And we will see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you.